Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the property meeting of the William Penn School District. This evening, we're here to see a presentation about our facilities. This is the first step in a multiple step process in this determining our master's facilities plan and aligning it to our plan that Dr. Becoats has laid out for us forward 2025. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Becoats for any remarks before we begin.
Good evening, everyone. Didn't know what Jan was going to say, but he basically said everything that I was going to say. So I guess that's a good thing. We have been working with KCBA, and that is the firm that has led us to this point. I do want to reiterate that the item in our strategic plan that specifically speaks to us having a facilities master plan gets us to tonight. And this is the first step in many steps that we have to take. Various items were reviewed and looked at as a part of this process, such as enrollment, facilities, programmatic items, etc. But tonight our focus is really going to be on environmental updates. And so I just want to make sure that the public is aware of that. And we will be coming back with other updates as well. So I'm going to turn it over now to Mike Kelly, who is the lead on this project, and you can introduce your team and then walk us through the presentation that we have for tonight. And I believe that there is a link in the chat where the presentation can be accessed. Mike?
Well, perfect. And thank you very much, Dr. Becoats and your team here at the William Penn School District for inviting us tonight and partnering with us on this exciting study of the facilities and educational study for your school district. We're really excited to be here. Along with me tonight are two other architects, Ryan Orr and Drake Hummel from our office, who have been crucial in our investigation of your buildings. We're going to kick things off quickly tonight with kind of a brief overview of what we look at when we take a look at these types of building studies. And along with our building engineering team at Snyder Hoffman and Associates, they're looking at mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection issues. We've visited every one of your schools in the district, seen a lot of the athletic fields, so we've been inside the buildings and outside the buildings. And when we are investigating and looking at school buildings, our firm has been in existence for close to 50 years, working primarily in K-12 education. So we've seen a lot. And we have a lot of knowledge and background to share with you. We look at two important aspects of your buildings. The first is operational. It's got to be a building. It's got to have a roof. It can't leak. It needs to make sure that we have heating and cooling. We want to make sure students are warm, safe, and dry within our envelopes of the buildings. So we're looking at all things that any homeowner would be looking at when it comes to the operational side. But we do know that these buildings are schools, and we need to make sure that we are looking at the educational values of these buildings, the educational spaces in these buildings, and making sure that they are functioning well for the delivery of academics to your students. Let me make sure that, Jeff, this is the same way that we had it before, and it's not showing on your screen there.
Still on the TV.
You're seeing that on there. We're just not seeing it on the, you're seeing it on the board, just not on the projection anymore.
Yeah, it's going through the TV, I think, for the Zoom to make sure it's on the.
Right. Yeah, it should be on the Zoom. I think we just lost our camera inside here, but.
Just keep moving.
Yep. So here we go. Now it looks like it's going to go. So tonight, as Dr. Becoats had mentioned, we're going to start with a few things from the study. There's a lot involved in these types of studies. But we're going to focus tonight on the focus and goals that we've been asked to achieve as part of the study. We're going to look at the existing conditions analysis criteria as well. What are the specific things that we're looking at in your schools and in your buildings? What are kind of the benchmarks that we want to work from? And then we're going to go into some of the individual assessments as well. So we want to make sure that we are, there we go, that should get me on there. We want to make sure that we're looking at the individual assessments of all those. And as we stated, there's future meetings to talk about enrollment, athletic facilities, and then kind of come back with some recommendations of possible improvements. So like I said, the focus is looking at all of your buildings, all 8 elementary schools, as well as the 3 secondary schools. We're looking at existing conditions, the delivery of educational programs, and enrollment projections, and how the capacity of these schools, meaning how big are they? Are they able to accommodate all of your students? Are there too many students? Those are all things that we want to look at in the buildings themselves. Some of the goals, one of the first things that we were asked to take a look at here was providing analysis of long-term maintenance planning for the district, specifically involved with indoor air quality. Indoor air quality in schools has been the topic of discussion for years. Certainly over the last 18 months, the focus of the quality of indoor air is at everybody's first thought. So that's certainly something that we will be talking about tonight. We want to analyze educational environments to optimize student performance and then prioritize. We're going to come back with a large list of things to do. And it's going to be the district and the community at large to come back and prioritize which one we want to start first. So kind of a quick introduction into, well, you talk about educational spaces. Well, what do you mean when you talk about 21st century educational spaces? Well, we know the workforce has certainly changed from when a lot of these buildings are built. Most of these buildings were built in the 40s and 50s. Your newer buildings were built in the 70s. That's still a while ago. The workforce has certainly changed. What we're teaching our students to enter into is not the same thing that they did back in the 40s and 50s. So we're teaching different. We're using laptops. We're using technology. We're using project-based learning. So our schools have to be able to adapt to those things. If we walked into a classroom today that looked like this, that would seem very foreign. Certainly because we're not packing 40 people in a classroom, having everybody look front. I doubt you could get the boys to wear ties. They're looking much more collaborative, much more one-on-one instruction, small group instruction with teachers and students working together. In our secondary schools, areas where students can do research independently, come back to a larger group and work collaboratively, and much more hands-on learning as well. So our schools are teaching different, so in a lot of cases they need to look a little different. So part of our study, the first thing we did is we met with a lot of your administrators, we met with a lot of your principals, and we said, hey, you tell us, what are some of the concerns that you have in the building? So some of the things that we heard back from them was talking about class size, separate spaces for some STEM and STEAM curriculum, a need for more flexible furniture, and a variety of things that really kind of lent themselves towards some newer types of academic spaces. So when we took a look at the assessment criteria, so what are we trying to look at as a benchmark when we first visited the schools? Overall functionality, building HVAC systems. This goes back to that top priority of indoor air quality. Building code compliance. Again, these buildings are old. Where are they meeting today's code requirements? Energy efficiency certainly has changed since the 40s. And security and safety protocols as well. Certainly, again, all of our top priorities is making sure that our students and faculty are safe in the buildings. So we want to take a look at that. One thing to share that we thought was a nice committee goal that was set from the state of Connecticut was talking about 4 goals to all school safety: deterrence, delay, detection, and response. And those types of categories are things to kind of think about when you walk into each one of your schools. And we can certainly go on quite a bit about school safety and security, but a couple of things that we had noticed that were maybe needed in some of the schools that we saw in your district, things like identifiable main entrances and accessible main entrances as well. A couple of schools, hey, go find the front door. I don't know where that is. Where's the parking versus where the front door may be? So if you may have visitors and parents kind of searching for the front door, having secured vestibules when you first walk into your schools, things like that. Interior spaces, the ability to conduct a lockdown in a classroom, the ability for a teacher to be able to lock those doors, and also make building-wide announcements throughout the school. So in a couple of cases, we saw some areas that had security stations, which was great. They were located kind of inside the main lobby. Typically, we'd like to see those out in a vestibule where you're interviewing a visitor, not in a public space where students are. We talked a little bit about robust locks and things like that on doors. We'd like to see, some areas where newer locks would be presented on the classroom doors. Visibility into classrooms is important. As we've mentioned, being able to find the front door of some schools, either landscaping's blocking that or maybe some signage would help. And then accessibility. Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, we're going to talk about a few times tonight. There's some entrances into schools that were not available or handicap accessible. So a couple of things to kind of look at there that are in the larger report. As we mentioned, one of the top priorities, again, is indoor air quality. And there's a couple of things to think about here. One of the top parts is ample and continual fresh air supplied into occupied spaces. And what that means is making sure that we're having multiple air exchanges in a classroom. Typically, you want to have upwards of 4 air changes in a classroom at a time, meaning you're providing conditioned air, whether that's cool or heated, but you also want the old air to get out. So in a lot of cases, that requires exhaust, that requires different types of systems. So those are things to look at. CO2 monitoring as well. If we just have baseboard heaters or a window air conditioner, that's not really monitoring the CO2 levels in a classroom. So with newer, more modern mechanical equipment, they can kind of monitor that. They might kick on in the winter and say, hey, we need to bring in some fresh air. That doesn't mean they're bringing in cold air, but we need to bring in fresh air to make sure that we're, waking these kids back up. If we're in a room with stale, it's hard enough. I have a teenager. It's hard enough to keep them awake, in a hot, tired old space. Keep that air fresh. And several other items to look at as well when it comes to indoor air quality. Some other things to consider, certainly things coming out of COVID, are exhaust systems out of nurses' offices, making sure that those are isolated and ventilated out. Ventilation in corridors, oftentimes that's an area of a school that's overlooked. So a couple of things to kind of set as benchmarks to our quality. So one kind of story we'd like to tell is something that we saw was at Penwood High School at the Cypress campus. Typical window air conditioners. You have a window unit there sitting there in the summer. It's blowing cold air in. It's set to 60, and that's in the summer. So it's cold in that room. It doesn't really need to be that cold. And sometimes you're using that to dehumidify, which we can understand, but it certainly doesn't need to be set that low. And it's using a lot of energy in which to accomplish that. What was interesting here is while all that cold air is coming in from the window air conditioner, it was also immediately being sucked right out the classroom with an exhaust vent here. So you're kind of getting fresh air that way, but you're also spending a lot of energy and a lot of resources cooling that, bringing that in, and then it's shooting right up an exhaust vent. When we walked on the roof of the school in August, it was cold on the roof. We thought, well, that's strange. Why is that so cold? You walk by the exhaust vent there, and all of that cold air is being thrown right out of the space. So you're conditioning the space, you're getting fresh air, but that's certainly not an energy efficient way of doing that. So there's some other methods that you may consider. So we put this diagram together to kind of talk about kind of a typical indoor air system for a classroom that you may look at. So you have a classroom, you'd have an air handling unit someplace in the school, sometimes on the roof. It's bringing fresh air into that unit, not directly into the classroom, but into the unit. That air can then be dehumidified. That's taking the moisture and things out of the room. That's making sure that we don't get mold and other bacteria and things into the air. Then that air is brought through into the building through a series of filters, whether that's particulates like a dust filter picking up pollens, or if it's something new like bipolar ionization, which is attacking more of the biological issues like COVID or the flu or things like that. There's a lot of other opportunities to do that way. Bringing that fresh air into a building, and then in multiple locations, quietly bringing air into the classroom. Unlike a classroom air conditioner, that's a single source, it's very loud. The student sitting right next to it might be cold and can't hear, while the student on the other side of the room, is hot. So here we have ventilation that's happening kind of more equally and quietly, acoustically separate in the classroom. We have things like CO2 sensors and thermostats that'll be set to, let's say, 74, where that system will turn off when it gets to a certain level. The CO2 sensor will say, hey, there's 28 kids in a class and everybody just came in from gym and they're breathing hard. We need to refresh that air maybe a little bit more than we would if that room was empty. So in doing that, then we're taking in this case, red, we're taking that air back out of the building into an air return. That goes through what's called a heat recovery wheel. So instead of just throwing that cold air out, we're taking the heat exchange from that, or in this case, if this is a winter condition, we're taking the temperature of that air and recycling it while we're removing the particulates of the air out back into outside. That is a better way to filter the air, to dehumidify the air, to control the air. So you see, it's a much more robust system than a baseboard and a window air conditioner. So this is kind of what we would be looking for in a system to have that, minimal 4 air changes per hour. So that was about as geeky as we're going to get into mechanical engineering tonight, I promise you. But we thought it was a good thing to set to show the difference between what we saw at Cypress there versus what we may be looking at. So some of these things may seem overwhelming, but we wanted to share, in a recent study, when school districts were asked, what's the biggest concern you have with your buildings? The number one answer by far was HVAC issues in a school. We see this everywhere. Every district is having issues with any building that's a little older, any building that hasn't been renovated in a while. HVAC concerns, indoor air quality is usually at the top of that list. So a unique opportunity right now is certainly with ESSER funding. That's federal funding coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic and providing some federal money towards improving indoor air quality. There's a lot of things actually that can be used for that money. Things like repairing, even just random maintenance repairs can be utilized. But really anything focusing on indoor air quality, anything we're doing with the remediation of mold or lead or other things, upgrading facilities to meet ADA compliance is also something that's on that list as well. So it's not just the HVAC system, it does allow for other upgrades and things that we notice that are needed in some of the schools. So as we mentioned, we're going to keep coming back to priorities. Again, you've got a large shopping list and there's going to be limited funds, there always are. So we're going to want to work with the school district on setting those priorities. And the first thing is to understand that there are only limited funds available, whether that's ESSER funding or certainly funding from the school district itself that will cover these improvements. ESSER funding has to be spent by 2024, which, believe it or not, is not that far away. And it takes a lot of time to plan these things, install these things, bid these things. There are numerous districts throughout the country that are all doing these same projects right now, which is great. It also is going to show that there's going to be a constraint on materials. So anything we wanted to do, let's say even next summer, is probably already, that ship may already have sailed. If we're really trying to plan for things that we may be able to do in the fall of 22 or the summer of 23, it's time to start planning for something that far out. And decisions should be made on a larger scale. We're going to talk about some big projects and some big ideas in future meetings about building renovations, building replacements possibly. Is there a building that needs a lot of things, but you know what? Maybe that's not the right building to put a lot of money into. That may be slated for a future replacement. Let's build a school right behind the existing school because we think we could do it much more efficiently of a completely new building. So let's make sure we talk about those things ahead of spending ESSER money or spending our limited funds, fixing something that we may end up moving away from in the future. So we thought we'd paint the picture tonight, try to simplify a very complicated issue into 3 categories. What schools should we be improving the HVAC system? Saying, all right, you've got a good base started, let's improve what you have. What schools are in an HVAC condition where it's like, you know what, that system's just too far antiquated, we should start over, let's replace it. And then what schools are kind of ripe for a larger renovation as well? Do we improve the HVAC system and renovate the building, bring up to ADA compliance, switch out door hardware, new floors and paint and LED lighting and things like that? Is there a larger investment that wants to be made into a certain building? So we're kind of picking HVAC between improving or replacing, and then we're deciding whichever one of those do we choose. Are we doing that isolated by itself, or is it part of a larger renovation? And those are the kind of 2 categories that we thought we'd lay out for you tonight. So again, 8 elementary schools, 3 secondary schools. We certainly have this building here to consider and talk about as well at the district office. So we created what's called a facilities condition index. We ranked the building. We basically took the baseball card stats of all of your buildings. We looked at site, we looked at the building exterior, interior, and we looked at the mechanical, electrical, plumbing of your facility. And we said, let's rank all those things. Let's create some numbers. Let's rank them from 1 to 5. 5 being, whoa, there's an immediate need here, we need to work on something, to 0 being, all right, we're in good shape. And then look at that score. We have ranges and results from 29% at Ardmore, because that's a building that was very recently done, to a building like at East Lansdowne, which scored a 70, which is the highest of the schools that we looked at. So when we kind of look at where these fall, we said, again, 0 to 10 is perfect. 10 to 20, that's great. You're doing a good job. We've got a long-term plan there. 20 to 30, there's some things to think about, maybe 5 to 10 years down the road. But once we get into 30s and 40s or anything over 50, that's something where we say, hey, there may be some immediate action here. And unfortunately, what we found was a significant amount of your schools scored over a 50. So there's a lot to look at there for what we would say is immediate action, or things that we should be thinking about in the short term, not necessarily the long term. So here's a list of all 11 schools and their FCI score. You'll notice that Penwood Middle School is called in progress. Our engineers, that's the one building they haven't gotten to. Now we walk through that, Ryan and I and Drake. We can tell you whenever that score comes out, it's going to be at the bottom of the list, meaning it's in good shape. It's going to be in the 20s because that system there is fine. The building there is fine. That's not a school that we would identify as a high need, which is a good thing. So as we complete the process of that particular school, we'll provide that information, but it's not going to be at the top of the list. Again, the schools that are really at the top, East Lansdowne, Penwood High School at Green Ave, and you can start to see right next to that the years that these were constructed: 1941, 1947, 1963. This is all before the energy crisis of the 70s. They had all kinds of issues then. Think about all of the things, sustainable attributes and green focuses that we have today. So 80 years later, there's a lot of different building sciences that go on, and so there's a lot of need there for those particular schools. So if we looked at the district HVAC improvement costs, so this is essentially a snapshot of all of the costs just looking at HVAC systems, whether we're replacing or improving, and we'll get into that individual list in a moment. We identified as much as $61 million worth of work just in the HVAC replacements. That's not even building renovations. But what this chart shows is kind of the amount of proportional amount per each building. So if you look at the largest need being Penwood High School at Green Ave, that makes sense. It's one of the oldest buildings. It had the second highest FCI score, and it's big. Any building that's larger than another building is going to cost more to renovate, cost more to include in and an HVAC improvement. So, schools like Colwyn, 3%. Hey, great, good for you. Well, that's also a very small building. And their FCI score was fine. It wasn't, one of the ones that are, top 5. So you kind of need to, in a way, kind of flip back and forth between this scale here to kind of tell you what the score was, and then say, all right, well, I've got a high score and a high percentage of need, but that's a big investment at the high school, again, mainly because that's one of the larger buildings in the district. If we were looking at full renovation costs, so again, no one's saying that we're doing this, but if you were going to say renovate every one of our buildings, fix every problem, make them all look brand new again, you're looking at a range of close to about $150 million. The percentages really don't change very much there from the screen before. We're just, Penwood at Green Ave is still at 23%. There's a few that go up and down by a percentage point or so. But again, you can kind of see where the distribution of that would all need to be spread out. And this is where, again, we would need to get into a priority discussion with the board and with the community to say, all right, do we go after the one with the biggest need, but that takes the most money? Or is there another effort to, maybe spread that out, go after 4 other buildings with that same amount? Those are discussions to have. So if we look at this list here, this is where we were kind of selecting improve versus replace. So at schools like Alden, Ardmore, Belle Ave, and Cowan, we're improving. So the system is a good system. It just needs some improvement. But buildings like East Lansdowne, Evans, and Walnut, those are systems that should be outright replaced. So of course the cost there is a little bit more. So again, improve or replace is talking about just HVAC. The renovation cost incorporates whichever one of those was selected and adds additional funds to other improvements in the school buildings. I know we said we'd keep going, but any questions there before we get into building by building? Just keep going. I'll go through these pretty quick. And again, I know that there's a packet that was given, and so I'll kind of go through this quickly in case there's any questions. So for each of the buildings, we kind of gave a brief overview, when it was built, how big it is, how big the land is, because some schools are in very small sites, and any interesting attributes with it. So with Alden and Park Lane are actually twins. They were built about the same time, and they're basically the same building. There's a couple of masonry concerns on the exterior. Both those buildings were built as open pods. So as most school districts have and continue to do, they went and filled in all the walls. Well, when they did that, they filled them in with metal partitions that actually don't go to all the way through the ceiling. The HVAC system there actually discharges into the corridor, which is something you'd rather not do. You'd like to have it ducted directly back into the system. So there's a couple of things there that are results of transforming a school that was designed in the 70s into something that's more conducive for education today. You see this here with kind of the triangular shaped classrooms, and that's certainly not an ideal shape, let's say, for classrooms. So this floor plan we thought we'd share. It also is a nice example of what we received, what we received back from your principals. So they gave us a floor plan of all of your schools and said, here's how I'm using every one of these spaces. So we had that knowledge, and again, it was very helpful, that collaboration with your principals. We're not going to share this with all the buildings tonight, but I wanted to show that in every one of these reports, there is a whole slide on mechanical, a whole slide on electrical, a whole slide on plumbing and fire protection. Things like, accessibility, ADA compliance are being called out in plumbing, water piping that's old. So there are things within those studies that break down each individual item. There's final reports from that FCI study that created that number for each school. So this kind of shows you the backup information that led to a lot of the ideas and thoughts that we presented earlier. So again, we have existing air system, what it is, what the recommendations are for that system. And then again, here we're saying improve what you have as opposed to replace it, and then what a renovation cost might look like. More quickly, Ardmore, again, a building that was just renovated in 2013. It's in great condition. A lot of the code issues and things like that have been remedied. So, again, everything in here was a very low score, which is good. It's kind of like golf. You want a low score. So this building here was in really good shape. So there's things to improve if you wanted to. And again, we weren't even recommending renovating here because there's really no need. Bell Avenue on 5.4 acres. So now you're talking about a site that's got a little bit more space to it. I'll foreshadow to our next conversation about possible expansion of that school. We thought that was a good idea and a good building to be expanded. Again, front of the school is not easily identifiable. That kind of goes back to some of the benchmarks we had set before. Again, it's an older building. Things like storage needs in the building, storage needs in the classrooms could certainly be addressed. And then the FCI score here, again, you're looking at things in the 5s like emergency generators, building-wide announcement systems, plumbing systems, things like that are scoring high, which is driving the number of that needs of that school up a little bit. So again, here we're saying improve the HVAC system and providing some numbers to that. At Colwyn, smallest school in the district, on the smallest site. What that creates is very limited educational space inside that building. In fact, there's some classrooms even in the basement and some shared spaces. So it's a very, very small school. That had been renovated in 2003, which unfortunately was 20 years ago now. So I know that's one of the recent renovations, but it's already 20 years old. So there are certainly some items to look at there. Again, it's a very small school, not one that would be easily enlarged by any means. And again, we kind of looked at the issues here, the things to kind of take a look at. Heating and cooling systems, after 20 years, it's time for them to be replaced. So unfortunately, even though that was a recent renovation, I'm doing air quotes for people that can't see, that recent is already 20 years. So again, here we're saying improve and providing some costs associated to that. East Lansdowne, the size of that school is 25,000 square feet. It only has 300 kids in it. One of the things we wanted to share was a floor plan of the second floor. This school is almost half the building is just the gym. It's a very large gym with a very small school kind of wrapped around it. And the building itself is very old. So this was a building as well that we thought has a lot of needs, has some space. Is that something that we want to add some capacity to? Is that something that maybe wants to be replaced? We could build a new school right behind it, maybe make a plan that's a lot more efficient. So here's some things that we were just kind of concerned about there, but that's one of the things to show there was that floor plan. You look outside, you go, wow, it's a big building. It's actually a big gym with some classrooms kind of wrapped around it. And again, there's some ADA issues here, some plumbing fixtures, and what we heard from principals there was talking about a need for more STEM space. Educational space in the basement, right next to storage rooms and things like that. So we thought, is that an area where maybe we want to maybe not have students down in an area where there's mechanical rooms and storage. So this is why this building really faced the highest of numbers. You're still using oil here. This is the one. I think we may have erroneously shown that at someplace else, but this is the one school that is being operated by oil. So again, that's not a very efficient system. So this is why we were looking here to completely replace that HVAC system. Evans shares its campus obviously with Penwood Middle School or Penwood ninth grade center. Here we are showing again another image in the lower left where the security cameras or the security station is out in the lobby. Teachers, in this case, again, another photograph of a door here where teachers want to make sure that they're able to lock down the classrooms inside, from the inside, not have to go outside of a classroom to lock down. The multi-purpose space, anytime you have a gym and a cafeteria shared, there's often scheduling issues and things like that that can be a little tough to schedule. So numbers here, again, you're looking at generators, electrical services, plumbing, and things like that, that kind of drove that number up pretty high. Bigger building than East Lansdowne, that's why the number's a little higher. Park Lane, again, as I said, is identical design to Alden. So a lot of very similar comments there. You can see, again, we're looking at building-wide announcement systems, plumbing systems, things like that in the school that could be improved. So this is another one that fell into the category of improve. Walnut Street is a very big school. So again, the bigger the school, the bigger the need, the larger the cost. Here we have older windows that should be replaced, several ADA issues kind of throughout the school. Art and music in windowless spaces. The library is in windowless spaces. So it's a thicker building. So there was a lot of educational spaces where children were that there wasn't a lot of access to natural light. So again, as we looked at the numbers here for electrical service, building-wide announcement systems, plumbing, heating, cooling, indoor air quality, all things that we felt needed to be replaced, this number is higher because it's a 75,000 square foot building. It's one of your larger physical elementary schools. We took a look at Penwood Middle School. Again, we had walked through there. Things like the gymnasium is actually a really cool space there. I think it's one of the largest gyms you have in the district. Some security concerns with grates on the windows on the outside, security stations inside the vestibule. Once we start to get into middle school, especially 7th and 8th grade, we'd like to see more media centers, more STEM spaces, more areas for social interaction. We're starting to kind of consider secondary schools like, not to say college prep, but start to feel like a little bit of a university setting. Students with laptops are going to be able to move around. So there's a desire for a little bit more of a high school level environmental feel in that building. So as we said, as the report comes from the building engineers, will provide that as well. But in general, the feeling there was that school's in good condition. The Cypress Street campus, 9th grade center. This building is about the same size as Walnut Street Elementary School. It's actually a little smaller. Here we found it's a much older building. Some site issues, accessibility issues kind of around the property. The gymnasium that was built as an addition actually doesn't even connect to the school, so students actually have to walk outside, so there's some security concerns when you get to something like that. So this was scoring around in the 60s. Again, thought that this was a building that had an HVAC system that really should be replaced rather than improved. The good news with this building is it's larger than you need it to be as only a 9th grade center. And again, a little bit of foreshadowing into future conversations about maybe moving some things around a little bit. But as it stands right now, there's some space. So maybe renovating that as a building is something that could be more easily achieved than some of the buildings that have larger capacity issues. Then the big guy, the Green Avenue campus with the 10 through 12 building. Here you have 130,000 square feet. It's on 13 acres. It's a big site. Obviously included in that site is the district building that we're sitting in here now. There it is, built in 1947. We're starting to see some masonry repairs and things that need to be repaired on the outside of the building. Masonry repairs lead to structural issues, also leads to water infiltration. So it starts to rain, Water gets in there, it freezes, expands that crack even bigger, and now next season you have more water infiltration coming into the building. Water infiltration can lead to all kinds of other issues. So again, making sure that the envelope of your buildings themselves are in good shape. In most cases, the roofs in the district were in good shape. But here we're looking at, an image where some of the masonry is deteriorating. You've got some areas where there's a little bit of deterioration on some steel lentils and things. That lower left picture there is kind of showing some handrails, guardrails, and a stair tower that could be a little longer. Here's the score for that. So again, here we're looking at some recommendations, replacing the HVAC and possibly renovating the building there. So wrapping up, that's about as fast as I could talk. The summary of the recommendations is there's infrastructure needs in most of the buildings. Either complete HVAC system replacements or improvements. Electrical and plumbing upgrades are needed as well. Anytime you're adding new systems, certain times you have to upgrade the electric in order to accommodate for those newer systems. Certainly there could be a whole presentation on energy efficiency, sustainable efforts in the buildings. Safety and security upgrades as well, improving and enhancing the secure vestibules at the front of the schools. Classroom locks, additional cameras, fire alarm systems, ADA compliance. We talked a bit about the focus on 21st century academic spaces, dedicated spaces for STEM, for technology, for music and art, and as well as improving some of the athletic facilities as well, providing health and fitness spaces. Physical education these days isn't just about being able to shoot a foul shot or play basketball. There's a lot of other physical education spaces we're seeing introduced in the high schools. So we thought that was something to be considered, as well as obviously the academic or athletic venues themselves. Air conditioning, the gymnasium at the middle school as an example. So moving forward, we think you need to set priorities. What are the priorities? Are we talking about a thing like HVAC replacement? Are we talking about systematic renovations of all of our schools? Are we talking about addressing capacity issues, which could be additions or replacements of schools? What are the priorities short-term and long-term? In the short term, you've got 2 years to spend quite a lot of money regarding ESSER funds. So let's not be too hesitant to say, all right, we know we're going to keep this building. We know this is a building for long-term. We know it's working well. Let's go in and fix these systems while we have the availability to have some funding there. But then you also need to budget for the long-term needs. If we're talking about anything large, like a new school or a big addition, those types of things need to be budgeted. And the best way we see to do that is to create that master plan. Maybe a committee that's brought together of community members, principals, board members, administrators, to help put that priority list together, to look at improvements versus renovations, expansions, replacements, possibly of buildings as well. But I think setting that priority is our kind of number one recommendation of how to take, again, a lot of information and start to create a pathway forward for improvement. So there's 101 slides in 35 minutes. And again, you guys have some additional information in your packets that we provided that, again, spell out more specifically mechanical, electrical, plumbing.
All right. I'm going to open the floor to board members if they have any questions for our guests.
Questions?
Mr. Wright?
I didn't want to go first. Especially when my last name is Wright. I'm usually at the end. But I like the idea about Bell Avenue that we have, HV, but they need to be upgraded. Have you seen how that system's set up in the auditorium?
At Bell Ave?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, again, our engineers have walked through that building. I think there's ways that they can accommodate, different types of filtration, different types of ways that we're not ripping out everything and starting over like some of the other recommendations. And as we mentioned, that's a great building. It's in a good location. It could certainly be expanded. It has space, unlike some other schools that are very, are on very small sites. That would be much more of a challenge to expand. So, there's arguments to be made to say, hey, let's take Bell Ave and fix it in kind, and then maybe we think about expansion in the future, or say, hey, let's fix, use our ESSER funds for a couple of other buildings, but at Bell Ave, let's plan for a larger renovation and expansion project outside of the ESSER funds, because that's a building of strength and quality in the district that we want to improve upon.
But did you see how the air conditioned vents are set up in particularly in the auditorium? I've never seen that anywhere before.
Ryan, you walked through that building as well. Do you remember
You're saying
Like
as,
in an
as
auditorium,
the
you see
units
how
are
it's set up.
up
Yeah,
top in
yeah.
the mezzanine
that's correct.
area.
That need to be more modernized.
Yeah, and certainly our engineers can talk more specifically to the specific systems themselves. But yeah, typically in a
It looked like a
retrofit,
box.
You're
It
trying
looked
to,
like a box. I've never seen that anywhere before.
the unit itself.
Yes, when you look up into the roof, up there in the ceiling auditorium.
Right. In the back of the auditorium where the spotlights.
Up there in the ceiling.
Okay, I'm not sure.
All right, but maybe we can go through it again, and maybe you and I can walk through.
No, I'm sure we have photographs of
Okay.
what you're speaking of too.
I think when there's space, the good thing with a mezzanine like that is
Like in
there's-
here, you see how this is set up? With the vents, that's not like that in Bell Avenue.
Mhm.
They're like a box, a rectangular box.
The ductwork is.
Right.
Oh, just the ductwork is exposed
Yes.
in the space, right? Well, and so, yeah, where I was going with the in renovations, if there's no space to fit it in the ceiling, it's the only other place to go is in the space itself. So yeah, I mean, the structure of that auditorium, the ceiling is tight up against the roof, so there's no other place to put that ductwork in the auditorium, unless you made another ceiling below the current
But you
ceiling.
can't make it smaller than it looks, the vents look like this.
So
You could bring the ceiling down.
Right,
So
that's-
what you have is the way that was constructed, the ceiling, when you look up in those classrooms, is kind of glued on ceiling tiles. That's on the underside of the floor above. So
Okay,
typically you'd have a ceiling like this. This is called a suspended ceiling. So it's a little below the roof or the floor above, which allows for ductwork to go kind of in between that. So at Bell Ave, they're just kind of running ductwork along the perimeter, shooting it out into the space. It's all exposed. It's certainly a less expensive way to do that, but you're losing some quality there and in that sound and insulation and things like that. But you have ductwork there, which isn't at some of the other schools. The Cypress campus, the window air conditioner just blowing air out like that. The Bell Ave system is set up to distribute that. Could we clean that up a little bit? Sure.
okay,
And that's why you're kind of classifying that under improve versus replace.
right. I agree with that. But I just like, definitely see some improvement.
Mhm.
We're not here to talk about priorities throughout the school tonight. We can hold it off to the next time.
Yeah, I believe that'll be in successive meetings. Tonight, we're just kind of getting an introduction into what
Okay.
we're looking at,
All right.
give some people time to digest what they have.
All right.
Priorities, I don't think we have the
All
space to kind of deal with that
All right.
tonight.
So I have one more question that's been very ongoing in the William Penn School District for years. That is that athletics field. Hopefully, that will be a priority.
Mhm.
And that's something that we can discuss. Now, we had talked many times over that we need an athletics field.
Mhm.
When our team, like we go to football games, our team do not have a locker room to go into.
Mhm.
The visitors don't have a locker room to go into. So the field need to be upgraded. We don't have, we can't have track meets here.
Mhm.
So we'd like to see that change. And plus, if you change that, we can probably be more revenue driven. If we have a super track based around the football team. That would be excellent. That would be able to attract maybe more students want to come here. Parents that see our school is moving forward. I'm shocked that I remember many years ago, I read on John Bartonfield, in track. I thought that was the worst field probably on the East Coast, second to us. Today they have a super track. So it's more than overtime for us to begin to move in that direction. And I think we put a committee together. I think that we can make it happen. We came very close several other times, but unfortunately it didn't happen.
No, as part
This
of our
time-
study, we are looking at that, again, indoor athletic facilities as well as outdoor.
Okay.
We had noted that earlier on saying, hey, we're already at, 100 some slides for tonight. That can certainly be something that we cover next time, but we are looking at that, and I do agree with some of
I guess
what
my
you're starting with.
final comment, I'm pleased with the presentation. It shows that we're moving forward and with hope. And also that we have, like I said, we talked about involving the community. Oh yeah, I do have one more concern. Architect. When you deal with contractors, they look at architectural drawing, not so much to see that architectural drawing is perfect. They look at it to see what flaws. And then when they found out that there's flaws, what usually hurts school districts or any other bill is cost overruns. So would there be, if we hire contractors, would there be, I like a reward and a penalty system. If we can't come and reward, but we have a penalty system that this situation is not dragged up and is shooting the cost up from 2 million, maybe 4 million to 5.
Right. Yeah,
So-
when we get to that point where we say, all right, this is the building we want to do, this is the scope of things that we want to do. We do primarily most of the work we do is K-12 schools. Of that, most of those projects are renovations and projects just like this. So for us, we have a very good track record of putting drawings together, making sure there's not overruns. There's always something that gets, kind of unforeseen that may be in a building. But we can talk about that,
Okay.
when we choose kind
That'd
of
be
which
fine.
building we'd like to go with.
Okay.
But we can, do our best. We've got a lot of examples that we can show you of schools that have been renovated, HVAC systems that have been replaced or improved without, a $2 million project becoming a $5 million project because somebody didn't do a very good job.
That's correct. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
I see Ms. Cook Henry has her hand raised. Before I go, are you?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay. I see Ms. Cook Henry's hand is raised. Ms. Cook Henry?
Yes, yes. Just to follow up to Mr. Wright's question in particular about the athletic field and whether or not that's going to be part of the next meeting, which is it another property meeting or will it be the facilities master plan meeting? So I heard a couple of suggestions as to what may be the next plan. I heard maybe a property meeting. I heard master plan, facilities master plan. And we did have some reference to the athletics. Will that be included in the next meeting?
I'm going to say that over the course of the next few meetings, we're going to continue to just kind of explore all the findings, the assessment that our team here has done for the district. Right now, we're looking at HVAC. We still have a couple other things that we're going to review. We're going to hold them at property meetings at this time that would go to create a master facilities plan that would align with the forward 2025 plan that Dr. Beatrice has laid out. So does that help you?
Yes and no, but I'm okay with it for now.
Yeah, like I said, from our standpoint, we are looking at those. So when you're ready, we can certainly have those conversations.
Okay, is that all your questions, Ms. Cook Henry?
Yes, Jan, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to turn the floor to Ms. Hoff. Do you have a question?
I just, one correction, all the elementary schools are K-6, not K-5.
Yes,
So if we can correct that in the presentation.
yes. So
I
I noticed that one.
And, for me, in addition to athletics, I look forward to sooner than later hearing how we want to spend our ESSER funds in regards to this matter, developing a complete plan, and then trying to figure out how to pay for it all. And not on the back of our taxpayers, which is a very challenging conversation. Over my tenure on this board, we've often had this conversation. These conversations are pretty easy to have. It's implementation of a complete $170 million project without proper funding. That is really the challenge.
Which is why, again, the importance of prioritizing where we start. Knowing, hey, we might not get to your building right now, but there's a reason why, and it's on the list, and here we're eventually going to get there. But we get started with the funds that are available.
All right, any other questions? Any other comments?
I would just like to say that this report is an eye opener. When you look at schools that are 74 and 75 years old, and you look at the findings, the high school, no sprinkler system, and I mean, all our schools like are not in compliance. The majority of them was not in applying, ADA compliance. So we have some work for us to do. But I'm just saying this report is an eye opener. How we do it, how we get it done, it's gonna be a big task. But I'm just glad that this is in front of us now.
I want to echo that same sentiment, Mr. Richardson. That's why we're all here tonight. But this is a big project. This is a big step. One step in that direction. This is not the final meeting. We're not making any decisions tonight. This is something that we're presenting to the board and as well to the community, as well as to our staff, to take this all in. Again, this is the first step. We have many steps to go, and we need time to kind of take all this in and process. And I don't want everybody to think that we're going to make a decision tomorrow. That is not happening. We have to understand the scope, and as Michael has shared many times tonight, we must be able to prioritize with the funds that we have currently, as well as future funds that we're going to consider in terms of where we're going to spend it. And again, we're going to ask the public to help with those decisions. It's not all going to be done behind a closed door. We do need the support of our community and of our staff. I'd also like to open the floor to any attendees. If you have a question. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Hopkins, you have your hand raised.
I do. So I just want to, I guess, get a sense of a timeline. I remember I got to put my hand down too, don't I? A sense of a timeline of, because I'm hearing that we're going to have these discussions, and that's all well and good. But and if I'm hearing correctly, I'm hearing we're going to do this in a course of time. So I would like to know the timeline, like where are we discussing, what topics are we going to discuss next, and what timeline are we looking to get a group together, and what timeline are we looking to start to do some kind of renovation?
Very good question. At this time, I don't have a timeline to give you. This is still kind of fresh, but I'm gonna see if Dr. Bicos has some sort of idea where he wants to move.
Sure. We do have funds to use, and I think Mike alluded to the fact that even for some projects that'll be going on next summer, now is probably the time in terms of just getting contractors and things of that nature. So taking all that into account, I would like for us to hopefully provide the board with a draft timeline, maybe within the next few weeks, so that at the next property meeting, or by that time, we could implement that plan. So that and I don't want to overpromise, but hopefully maybe within the next 3 to 4 months, we will be able to come back with some recommendations on how we move forward. Because time is of the essence, I think, in some regard. And so that's what I would share tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Because, and again,
Does anybody have questions about that? Does that seem reasonable at least at the starting point?
No, I think that if we had sort of an outline that sort of fleshed out a bit more of what you said
Okay,
in, the next week or so, that would be awesome.
okay.
Right,
Again.
Ms. Hopkins, does that make sense?
Excuse me.
Sorry, yes, yes.
Oh, you still have the floor.
do you have any more questions, Ms. Hopkins?
I do not. Thank you very much.
Mr. Wright, you have
Oh,
a
yeah,
comment?
the timeline is very important. Wouldn't that be set up by the architect and the contractors?
Yeah, I mean,
what would be phase one?
the actual construction in any type of school project is a very busy summer. 10 weeks. And like I said, almost every other school district is doing something over a summer.
And see, that would be a great idea to monitor cost overruns. It'd be phase
Mhm.
1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. Now, we still stuck on phase 1 and we supposed to be on phase 4. We're in trouble.
Right. Yeah, so the way to make a successful summer project is to be planning that in the winter. So if we're, as far as the timeline goes, we're sitting here in October, if we are looking for maybe the next 2 months to make those decisions, make some priorities, enter into January saying, here's where we're going to start, take part of, next year to plan, to design, to document, to get contractors on board. So you're the first ones out of the gate for the summer of 23. There could be work in the spring. We always have to be careful when we're in buildings occupied by students. So there's only so much you can do when students are there, and then a whole lot of stuff you're trying to do when they're not there. So if all of that equipment is sitting there on site, come June 15th or whatever that day is, boom, you're in there going. If you're ordering things on June 15th, it's not going to be there on time. So that schedule is important, and we'll help you coordinate that.
Yeah. That was an excellent question.
Now you're asking the right questions.
All right. Any more comments, Mr. Wright?
Oh, no.
All right. I'm going to open the floor to the public. If any attendees would like to make a comment or a statement, please raise your hand or use the Q&A function. And while we're waiting, I just want to again, reiterate that, this is a big project, so we don't want to make any hasty decisions. We do need to think about making sure that we make the right decisions and where we spend our money, so that we're not being wasteful. Ms. Hopkins?
Yes, and I'm sorry about this. Actually, I'm not sorry. Generally, and I'm asking this of Mr. Kelly, Mr. Mike Kelly. Generally, now I heard you in the presentation say that your company has worked with numerous schools in these kinds of projects. Generally, what is the timeline? So what usually how am I trying to ask this question? How do you guys process the timeline for those schools that you worked on?
Yeah, it's a good question. It comes down to how much you're trying to accomplish. If you're looking at, a HVAC improvement, that's easily done over a summer. If it's replacing the whole system, well, that's something that may want to start in the spring, where you're opening up ceilings and corridors and starting to get some piping in, kind of second shift when kids are out of the building, and then trying to do as much as you can over a summer. If it's a renovation project, sometimes that starts in one summer, lasts throughout the academic year. We talked about Penwood at Cypress has some areas where we could probably shut down, not have classes on the 3rd floor for a little while, renovate those spaces, then move kids up to the 2nd floor and renovate the 2nd floor. So there's some availability of swing space there. Anything that you're building, let's say an addition, is at least a year of planning before you're going out to bid and putting a shovel in the ground, because there's land development issues and things like that. Anything that you're not building extra to, that really you just need a building permit for, not zoning approvals and things like that, you want to be still want to be planning 6 to 8 months as well. And again, getting out to bid, especially with HVAC replacements, especially because there's $1 trillion worth of ESSER funds out there, and everybody's buying HVAC equipment over the next 2 years. We're bidding one now for next summer. We're bidding it next week, October, ahead of a summer project. So this time next year, if we're looking at some major projects, we should be, or significant upgrades, we should be bidding it this time next year.
This time next year.
So let's take the fall and let's take the fall to talk about it, the winter to kind of get started, the spring to be documenting, and be ready to go out to bid next summer, so that we're lining up contractors, again, very early in the season, because like I said, as many school districts that are doing HVAC projects this summer, there's going to be even more next summer, because everything essentially has to be done by the summer of 24.
Now, I'm also looking at a realistic, because watching the news with the shipments and stuff and COVID and stuff. How are we? And if all these schools around our nation is looking at all this upgrade, how realistic are we in looking at getting a system in our schools and in our district?
You are, if we order it ahead of time. So there are a lot of projects happening. It's just that the supply is low and the demand is high.
Right.
So the result of that, unfortunately, sometimes is increased costs. We saw a lot of that this year. We're starting to see those costs coming down a little bit, or at least not going up as fast as they have over the last 6 to 8 months. People talk about $80 2x4s. Well, they're not $80 anymore. But they're not, $19 like they were 2 years ago. So some of that is calming down, but the best way to still achieve what you're looking for is proper planning and getting started. So we have some time. That's why we thought, October, let's present the issues. That way, November and December, we're prioritizing, we're addressing everything. That way, in January, February, we're starting to make decisions moving ahead so that we're ready to go.
That's what I want to hear. Okay. All right. So, because I just really want to make sure, because, the news is talking about we don't have brand new cars and shipments, and the boats are still sitting out in the ocean. And I just want to, I want to make sure that, not only the board, but our constituents and our staff understands, what we're working with and what parameters we're working with. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hopkins. Ms. Brown, I see your hand up. You're able to speak now, Ms. Brown.
Yes. Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, good evening. So I've been an employee in this district, as well as a student who attended here, and also a property owner. And I know that Ms. Huff said, it's been challenging when it's time, for people to increase their taxes to maybe pay for things. But I think the issue comes in is when people don't see where it's going. And so I'm curious to know, how many people do we have on this call tonight? Like people who are besides board members and people from the company and from working. Are there other people like taxpayers who are on here?
So yes, there are.
Okay. And the reason why I ask is because if we make a conscious effort to get more people involved, we'll get the ideas, but we'll also get more support. There's so many things that we could improve. And I know that the fair funding is part of the reason why we can't get what we need, but we also need to make sure that is very transparent and where people can see where this is going. And so I like the conversation that's happening. We've been here before. We just want to see some action. And I think with this new administration, I'm starting to see that. It's just the idea that I do want to put it out there that we've been here before. it's been quite frustrating. You know, the taxes have been raised, but I haven't seen exactly where things are going. So I do appreciate this conversation, the presentation tonight, and I'm on board. If anyone, if you need people for input or just support, I just wanted to say publicly, I'm here.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Any other comments or folks who want to share? Seeing none, we're going to probably schedule a property meeting.
I actually have a comment, Mr. Mr. Jang. I actually do
Yes.
have a comment.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Tong.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say that I am really glad that the things that have come to light in this audit have come out for us to be able to make the adjustments that we really need. And I have to say to Libby, we hear you loud and clear, definitely with the information, with taxpayers, everything that they always, come to meetings and speak about. And I do want to just emphasize that our community is a community with like the attitude of show me what you're doing. So I just, wanted to piggyback off of that and say that, she's absolutely right with making that comment. And that is the type of community that we have, especially coming from Darby, Yaden, East Lansdowne, and Alden, those areas especially. But just wanted to say that, and thank you for this audit. It definitely is very thorough and is eye opener.
And to piggyback off of that, Ms. Boykins, I do want to share with all of those who are on the call this evening to please talk to your neighbors, please talk to your friends, others who are in the district. Share with them the presentation and help us get the word out that we do need to do to improve, and that we do need their support, and that when we do hold our next property meeting, that please come in and participate and help us reshape the district so that we can have be proud of what we are, Penwood proud. Any other comments? Thoughts? Looking around online. If not, I'm ready to adjourn while looking for a meeting next month. Please share with your folks that we'll try to schedule something next month, and come on out and be Penwood proud. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.